You're driving home from the range with your rifle in the back, a couple boxes of ammo, and that new accessory you just bolted on last week. It's been a good day, you're relaxed, and you're thinking about what you're going to have for dinner. Then you see blue lights in your rearview mirror. The officer walks up, shines his flashlight into the car. His eyes pause for half a second on your case and that accessory, and suddenly you're not just going home from the range anymore. You're standing on the side of the road, trying to explain your setup under the ATF's 2026 rules. And here's the part nobody tells you until it's too late. In 2026, the ATF changed how they treat at least 5 things gun owners do every single day. Get just one of these wrong, and you could walk straight into a felony you never intended. Week after week, I see the same pattern. Good people, no criminal record, thought they were doing everything right, and one tiny detail turns into a major legal problem. What you're about to hear is general information, not your personal legal advice. Laws change, states differ, and your situation may be unique. So always verify this for where you live and talk to someone who knows your state. But what I can do is walk you through 5 very real traps that 2026 made a lot more dangerous. And for each one, I'm going to show you the everyday situation, how the risk shifted, and what I would do right now if I were in your shoes. Let's start with the one that has created the most confusion: how certain accessories and configurations can suddenly be treated like NFA items. Picture this. You're at the range, and your buddy brings out a pistol with a short barrel and an accessory configuration that used to be all over social media. He grins, hands it to you, and says, "Don't worry, man, it's legal. I checked online." You shoulder it, you shoot a few rounds, you talk about how it feels. For years, that sort of thing was in this gray zone where most people assumed, if the store sold it to me, if big channels are showing it on YouTube, it must be fine. The problem is that in 2026, the enforcement focus moved again. The ATF isn't just looking at what's written on the box. They're looking at what your gun looks like in real life, how it's set up, and how it's being used. Configurations that people got comfortable with over the last decade are being re-examined. Things that were treated one way before are now being looked at a lot more like short-barreled rifles or other NFA items in certain situations. That doesn't mean every gun is suddenly illegal, but it does mean the margin for error got smaller. If I owned anything that even brushed up against that line, here's what I would do. I would stop assuming that it passed a background check once, or the guy behind the counter said it was fine is good enough. I would make a list of any firearm I own that has a short barrel, any kind of brace, any accessory that changes how I shoulder or fire it, or anything that could easily be converted from one category into another. Then, before I drove across state lines with it, before I stored it at a buddy's house, before I posted pictures of it online, I would get absolute clarity about how that setup is treated today, not 2 years ago. That means reading current guidance from official sources, not forum rumors. That may mean talking to a lawyer who actually does firearms work and asking, with this configuration, in this state, what am I looking at? And if I changed any major component, especially barrel length or anything that affects how it's fired, I would treat that like I just bought a new gun and start the legal analysis over. Legally, the reason this matters is simple. Once something is treated as an NFA item, the question is no longer, is this a technical mistake? It becomes, are you in possession of an unregistered NFA firearm? And that's where felony territory lives. You don't get points for meaning well. But let's say you don't own anything exotic. You're not running braces. You don't have anything short-barreled. You're a pretty vanilla rifle and handgun person. You might be thinking, okay, I'm safe. Now imagine this next one, because this is where a lot of careful people get burned. You walk into your local gun shop to buy something you've bought 10 times before. The clerk slides a stack of papers across the counter. You've seen those forms so many times you could almost fill them out with your eyes closed. You start checking boxes, answering questions from muscle memory, glancing up at the TV in the corner. It feels routine, it feels boring, and that's exactly why it's dangerous. For years, people approach these forms like a speed bump. I know the answers, I'm honest. They'll tell me if something's wrong. In 2026, the environment changed. The ATF has been looking far more closely at small discrepancies, inconsistent information between forms, and anything that even smells like sloppiness or misrepresentation. That especially includes things like buying through a trust, an LLC, or any kind of entity, and then filling out something as if you were buying as an individual or vice versa. It includes addresses that don't match, dates that don't quite line up, or boxes checked in a way that doesn't match your situation. If I were sitting in that shop today, pen in hand, I would slow down to a crawl. I would read every single line as if I were reading a contract that could be used as evidence one day, because that's exactly what it is. I would make sure the way my name is written matches my ID. I would make sure that if I am using a trust or a company, every reference to ownership and transferee lines up with that choice. I would not guess on any question. If I hit something where I thought, I'm not 100% sure what they're asking, I would stop and say, explain this to me, or I would politely step aside and call a professional before I put ink on the page. In 2026, more and more of these little mistakes are being interpreted as you should have known this mattered. When that happens, the narrative shifts from harmless paperwork error to providing false information on a firearms form. And now we're back in the land of potential criminal charges. From a legal standpoint, once you sign, you're saying, I have read this. I understand it. I swear under penalty of law this is correct. That's a heavy sentence most people treat like a signature on a grocery receipt. But it doesn't stop with individual mistakes. There's a third trap that blindsides people who would swear they are the careful, responsible ones. Imagine you've been an owner for years. Maybe you even have a small FFL, or you buy and sell privately within the law. You've never been arrested, you've never been in trouble, and you think of yourself as the by-the-book guy in your group. Over time, though, you've gotten a little relaxed on the details. A record here is missing a date. A log there isn't updated for a week or two. You store some guns in one place, some in another, and you keep meaning to sit down and straighten all of it out. From the ATF's perspective in 2026, they're not just looking at a single piece of paper or a single incident. They're looking for patterns. They're asking, is this a one-off error, or is this person consistently sloppy? Is this confusion, or is this willful disregard? If they ever show up to look at your records, or if something happens that brings attention to you, a theft, a traffic stop, a trace request, they're going to see the entire story, not just the one day you did everything right. A pattern of small problems can be interpreted as you not caring about compliance. And that's when you start hearing the word willful. If I were serious about protecting myself in this environment, I would pick a night this month and do a self-audit. I would gather up my firearms records, my purchase history, any NFA paperwork I have, any logs I'm supposed to be keeping, and I would look at them the way an outsider would. Are there missing entries? Are there dates that don't make sense? Are there guns I can't immediately account for exactly where they are supposed to be? I would fix what I already know is wrong before someone else finds it. And if I ever got that phone call or knock on the door from an agent wanting to ask questions, I would remind myself of something very important. You are allowed to be polite, calm, and firm while also saying, I'm not comfortable answering questions without speaking to my attorney first. That sentence alone has saved a lot of people from turning a small situation into a life-changing one. Your job in that moment is not to guess, not to volunteer theories, and not to fill silence with nervous talking. Your job is to protect yourself by not making statements you haven't thought through. In 2026, when the focus is on patterns, every word you say can be used to build a story about what kind of gun owner you are. Let the records speak, and let counsel guide you through the conversation. Now let's move to a trap that I see tear families and friendships apart, and most of the time, nobody involved thinks they're doing anything wrong. Picture this. A buddy is going through a divorce, or moving, or dealing with a rough financial patch. He calls you and says, can you hold on to a couple of my guns for a while? I don't want them in the house right now. You're a good friend. You have a safe. You say sure. Or maybe it's your adult child who lives in an apartment, and you have more secure storage, so you keep their firearms at your place just for now. The longer just for now goes on, the blurrier the line gets between who really has possession. For a long time, most people treated this as common sense lending and storage. No one drafted paperwork. No one thought about how it would look on paper. And as long as everyone was honest, they figured it would never matter. In 2026, this kind of casual transfer and storage has a lot more potential to raise eyebrows. The questions become, who actually owns this firearm? Who has control over it day to day? Has there effectively been a transfer without going through the normal process? Are you just storing, or are you acting like the owner in every way that matters? If I were being asked to store someone else's guns today, I would think twice. I would ask myself, do I understand their situation? Could there be a protection order, a legal issue, or something I don't know about that makes this more complicated? If I chose to do it at all, I would be very clear in writing about who owns what, where it's being stored, and under what conditions it can be accessed. I would not treat it like a casual favor where people can come and go and pull things from my safe without a record of it. And there are situations where I would simply say no. If it feels like I'm becoming a stand-in owner, if they are effectively transferring control to me because they can't or won't possess the guns themselves, I'm going to step back. That's especially true if there are red flags like criminal charges, restraining orders, or anything involving prohibited status. The law cares a lot about who is in constructive possession, not just whose name is on the receipt, but who actually has the ability to use, move, and control the firearm on a daily basis. It's very easy to slide from helpful friend into unlawful possessor without realizing it. Even if you never hold anyone else's guns, the fifth trap follows you everywhere. In your car, across state lines, into hotels, rest stops, and parking lots. Imagine you're taking a road trip. Maybe you're headed to visit family. Maybe you're going on a hunting trip. Maybe you're just crossing 2 or 3 states in a day. You toss a handgun into the console, or you put a rifle case in the back and think, I'm fine. There's some federal protection for transport. I'm not doing anything wrong. The problem is that many people have only a half-remembered idea of what those transportation protections are, and they haven't looked at how each state along their route treats things like magazine capacity, loaded versus unloaded, where in the vehicle a gun can be, and what counts as a sensitive place. In 2026, with more focus on coordination between agencies and more scrutiny on firearms in sensitive locations, the old casual habits around travel can look a lot worse than you intend if something goes sideways. A simple traffic stop, a car break-in, or a hotel issue can suddenly put your decisions under a microscope. If I were planning a trip today, I would not wait until I was already on the highway to think about the law. Before I loaded anything into the car, I would look up the states I'm going to drive through and the latest information on how they treat out-of-state gun owners. I would err on the side of caution with how I store firearms and ammunition, locked, separated, and not sitting loose in a door pocket or glove box. I would pay close attention to places where guns are flat-out banned or heavily restricted, even in vehicles, places like certain government buildings, schools, and other designated sensitive areas. And if I had any doubt, I would choose the more conservative option instead of assuming I'll probably be fine. From a legal standpoint, travel is where a lot of "I didn't know" stories begin. But remember, when it comes to firearms law, "I didn't know" is not a defense the way people hope it is. You are expected to know, or to have made a reasonable effort to know, the rules where you are. 2026 didn't change that reality. It just made ignorance more dangerous because the gap between your habits and current expectations may be wider than you think. So where does all of this leave you? Let's pull it together. In 2026, the ATF changed how they look at accessory configurations that brush against NFA territory, which means you can't treat that as a gray area anymore. They tightened up attention on paperwork and forms, meaning that what used to feel like a boring routine now needs your full focus. They've leaned harder into seeing patterns of behavior, not just isolated mistakes, which is why self-auditing and tightening up your own records is so important. They are looking more closely at who really possesses and controls a firearm. So casual, "I'm just holding it for a friend" arrangements are much riskier than they appear. And travel, something almost every gun owner does at some point, sits on top of a patchwork of laws where one wrong assumption in the wrong place can ruin your entire trip and a whole lot more. If you want a simple way to remember this, think of it like a 2026 ATF checklist. First, know whether any of your setups might be creeping toward NFA territory, and don't rely on internet legends to decide. Second, treat every form and piece of paperwork like it's Exhibit A in a future case file, because it might be. Third, clean up your patterns, your records, your storage, your habits, so if anyone ever looks in from the outside, they see care, not chaos. Fourth, be very cautious about storing or holding guns that aren't yours, especially when you don't know the full story. And fifth, when you travel, plan the legal side of the trip with the same care you plan the route. Now I want to hear from you. Out of these 5 traps, which one surprised you the most? Was it the accessory and NFA issue, the paperwork, the pattern of enforcement, the transfer and storage problem, or the travel and storage risk? Tell me in the comments by just dropping the number 1 through 5 and your state. When I see a lot of people from a particular state, I know I need to prioritize a breakdown for your specific laws and how they interact with what we talked about today. If you want a lawyer walking you through this mess all year, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Every week, We break down federal law, state-by-state rules, and ATF updates in plain English so you know exactly how to stay safe, legal, and confident as a gun owner. You don't have to live in fear of what you don't know. You just have to be willing to learn it before someone in a uniform decides to teach it to you the hard way.